Hello and welcome to the Euractiv Policy Triangle debate. My name is Dave Keating, and today we're going to be talking about the packaging and packaging waste regulation. This has been a big law going through the EU legislative process over the past months. It's been subject to a lot of attention, a lot of lobbying, because it involves a lot of different stakeholders, and it's going to have a big impact on consumers in terms of the type of packaging you're going to be seeing over the coming years. So we're very lucky to be joined by some of the experts on this file who have been dealing with it exhaustively over the past months. So let me introduce them to you now. We have here with us Aurel Ciobanu-Dordea, who is Director for Circular Economy at the European Commission. We have Larissa Copello, who is a consumption and production campaigner with Zero Waste Europe. And we have Annick Carpentier, who is Director General for ACE, that's the Alliance for Beverage, Cartons, and the Environment. Thank you all so much for joining us. So, Aurel, let's start with a question for you. The big change with this, because we had legislation dealing with this previously, right? And that was a directive. That was the PPWD. And now we have the PPWR. Can you explain to us why the Commission thought that this needed to change from a directive to a regulation? Just as background, a directive is where the EU sets goals for member states, national governments. They figure out their own way to get there. A regulation is directly applicable. So why was this change needed in the Commission's mind?
Directly applicable. This is part of the explanation of why the change was necessary. Directly applicable on the economic operators, why the directive is applicable to the member states, and the member states must adopt national legislation which transpose the directive in the terms of the national regulatory systems. And here the problems in a way appeared. During the enactment of these national transposition measures, many member states made their choices, legitimate choices, allowed by the directive, so not against the directive, in terms of certain prohibitions or certain permissions, in terms of certain targets, more ambitious targets, labeling requirements, eliminating certain forms of packaging from their national market. So fragmenting more and more what is supposed to be a single European market for packaging, and impinging also on the way in which, or the fluidity in which the products which are packaged circulate on the single market.
Larissa, from the perspective of groups campaigning for the reduction of waste, did you guys see this as an opportunity to strengthen the legislation? Did you have concerns that it could be, you could end up with a loosening of the legislation? How did you guys feel about this whole project to redo it?
So indeed, we had mixed feelings in the beginning of directive or regulation. We thought, well, if it's a regulation, if it's very ambitious, then it's better. So it's directly applicable, and it's not happen. What's happened with the Single-Use Plastic Directive, I think there are still so many member states which are kind of lacking behind the implementation, and there was misunderstanding as well in the implementation regarding what is in the directive. For instance, the composite packaging, which is included in the Single-Use Plastic Directive, was not perceived as safe by some member states. So indeed, there was like this issue of implementation, but it's actually it allows member states to indeed go beyond in some measures. So we see as well as a kind of a hybrid. I'm not sure if that is possible. So in the end, I think it's a good compromise because the regulations applies directly, but it allows member states to go beyond in some measures to be more ambitious, hopefully.
Annick, this was a big legislative file that got a lot of attention. It required a lot of work from the people that are working in this sector here in town and also all over. How does it feel to have it done? Are you happy with the result? And how do you feel about the transition from a directive to a regulation?
We're very happy it's done indeed. No, it's been very intense for all stakeholders, and it can be explained through the fact that it does impact on basically all sectors in society. I mean, everyone is impacted by packaging and sees packaging. It's also the vision of it every day. I mean, if I take beverage carton, you have a beverage carton on your table basically every day with milk, juice, whatever. So it does impact everyone in his life or her life. And yes, we're very pleased as well that this is a piece of regulation and not a directive, because indeed there are sustainability and innovation needs that are required through the PPWR, but also companies want to move forward in becoming more and more sustainable. But that, of course, requires investments, money. And if you have different requirements in different parts of Europe, and I mean, you were very gentle saying different member states, within a member states, in some cases, you have different requirements, which, I mean, if you think about it, you know, you've got a factory that produces a product, say milk or juice, that is packed and then shipped around. Within the same country, you need different things, and now with the labeling requirements, it would mean even different labeling requirements within the same country. This is really diverting investment from where it should be. So we're very pleased, but indeed we're also a bit concerned in a way that member states can go further to meet the recycling. And I'll make a point. Yeah, in a limited
topics,
way.
but it is true that it's breaking from
It's
away from the classical logic
principle.
of the regulation.
Yeah. And very, very honestly, I mean, we hope that it will not impact too much the harmony of the single market.
As you mentioned, and the consumers are really at the heart of this proposal. This is a thing we all deal with every day, packaging, right? How are things going to change for consumers because of what was just agreed as opposed to what exists right now for them? What are the main differences that they're going to see?
Well, some of their habits and choices will have to change. They will face more sustainable forms of packaging, I think, and those who are take an interest in minimizing their environmental footprint will find a response to their concerns there. They will have also to face situations where there will be no packaging and situations where instead of packaging they will have to reuse.
What's your perspective on where we ended up? Why do you think this attracted so much lobbying, this piece of legislation? And do you think that in the end, legislators in the European Parliament, in the European Council, listened to science, or were they swayed by the different lobbying voices?
Indeed, there was very intense lobbying. It gave me a lot of work because we NGOs, we don't have capacity as industry has, not the same. But yeah, indeed, it attracts lots of lobbying because it deals with all packaging plays in the market, and it's huge. So, well, from what we have started from the initial proposal and where we end up, of course, if I compare the initial proposal from the Commission and now, I would say it has been watered down, the ambition has been diluted, but seeing like the before the directive, as it was only dealing with recycling, managing waste, and now we have a regulation for the first time preventing waste from happening at first place with reuse measures, with DRS, with market restriction bans. So, I mean, it's a good step forward, and we are very happy the legislation. It's I mean, hopefully,
Yeah,
it's almost there.
We cross fingers.
Yes. And I think the basic, like what we need to be careful and be attentive will be indeed for the implementation and on the ground, because there's a lot of exemptions that were added in the text from the original proposal. Let's say, for instance, reuse targets, if member states achieving X numbers of recycling targets. There are exemptions from the market restrictions as well. So that we need to be careful to not allow exemptions where they would not be allowed to have it. Yes.
Annick, there were a lot of different voices bending the ears of legislators during this process. Do you think that all the different sectors here were listened to equally by legislators? Did everybody have a chance to have their say here?
Yes, I do believe so. I mean, it was indeed very intense. also very polarized. Personally, but I'm sure I'm not the only one, I regret a little bit the lack of time to share, to exchange, because it was a very short process. Even if you compare with the Single-Use Plastic Directive, that was already very short. This one was like speed, really speedy process, which did not always, from all sides, the Commission, even the Parliament, yourself, ourselves, allow time to really exchange. And that led sometimes to very polarized and positions. And for example, let's take LCAs, which have been at the center of the battle many, many times.
Life cycle analysis.
Yeah, life cycle analysis, sorry. It's still the best scientific tool we have to assess the sustainability of a life cycle of a product or a process, etc. Yet, it all depends on the assumptions you make from the start. Is it 10 times rotations, 20 times, 25? Is it 10 kilometers, 25, 100? It all depends on that. And so, of course, you can have LCAs giving slightly different results. And for me, it would have been really valuable to sit together with NGOs and maybe the Commission and say, okay, let's agree on the assumptions from the start and see where it leads us. I cannot resist, I'm sorry, to say that Zero Waste Europe and WeLoop did a study a few years ago in 2020 in which it was said that aseptic beverage cartons have a lower carbon footprint than reusable packaging. Again, I can show you the study. Don't worry, I checked my book. And so, yes, there are cases where, indeed, single-use may still be the best option versus reuse. And leading to actually the ambition of the proposal, the first thing I'd like to say is that the Commission's objective was to say that by 2030, all packaging would be recyclable and or reusable. That will be the case, I believe. That goal will be achieved. Of course, implementation is key, etc. But that is there, certainly. In terms of reuse, yes, it may be seen as slightly watered down, but yet I think we move from nowhere to quite some ambition. And then we will see where the market and where consumers lead us as well. The market can always decide to go further. There are reusable, if I take juice, for example, which is a very acid product, the only packaging you can use if you want a reusable packaging is glass, which is heavy, has a high carbon footprint, and therefore maybe not suited everywhere. But there are places in Germany or elsewhere where you have glass bottles with juice, which you can use as reusable. The market says it. But having a flat target across the EU from the north of Finland to the south of Greece or Portugal, that is something else.
Aurel, so Annick mentioned that there will be implementing work that the Commission needs to do in the coming years, but in terms of what's going to need to be happening out there in the member states among companies, what is the Commission going to be watching most keenly in the early years, and which area do you think is most likely to bring infringement action?
Well, hopefully none, because everybody will have the interest to comply from the beginning. But I would like to say, I mean, we couldn't see more eye to eye with the industry. Who said that DG Environment is not is polemicizing with the industry? No. And seriously speaking, now we fully share, maybe in a bit of a different order, but doesn't mean a difference in order of magnitude. And also we share the same priorities with the environmental NGOs. So it is important indeed to have implementing rules that are realistic. And actually, as the regulation is the expression of a societal compromise, it reflects the compromise of the European societies and of the member states and of the societal sectors and economic sectors that could be reached in the year of grace 2024. So the implementing acts authorizing different things must be the expression. We want to consult the industry and must be the expression of a compromise between public authorities and private actors.